Welcome back to Kermode Uncut, where, like a lazy supply teacher, I am aware that I've been very, very bad about marking and returning your homework. Loads and loads of responses to a number of threads running on the blog. Just a bit of time to catch up. Firstly, I was talking a couple of weeks ago about going back and seeing AI again and loving it, having disliked it the first time and apologising to Steven Spielberg about it. And I said to you, what was your guilty pleasure? Which Spielberg movie did you find was the one that worked for you but didn't work for other people? Loads and loads of responses. Not everyone agreed about AI. This, for example, from Dan. AI a masterpiece, not loving Kubrick. Mark, you've gone insane. Well, quite possibly so. However, here are some of your choices for movies that stuck out in the Spielberg catalogue for you, if not for everybody else. This from Godless Smeghead. Mark, my Spielberg guilty pleasure has to be Always. I know exactly how you feel about this. It's definitely not one of Spielberg's best films. No, it's not. And it was completely overshadowed with the release of Ghost around the same time, which indeed it was. But for me, it's the central performances from Richard Dreyfuss, Holly Hunter and John Goodman that make the film work. It's schmaltzy and it's from left field, but it's a film I like to return to now and again. One of the Beard's most underrated movies. I agree with that. I've got a real sentimental affection for Always, despite everything that's wrong with it. This from James. 1941, it's a hard one to fly a flag for. For all its problems, it has such good memories for me. I remember watching it with my girlfriend when I stopped the film to propose to her. Now we've been married for 21 years. I have to say, a 21-year marriage is what you'd need to make 1941 look like it was even half decent. A couple more. This from M. Koss. Good grief, 65 comments in. Only a couple of people have spoken up for Munich. I can't think of a more unfairly maligned film in recent memories. The performances are wonderful, particularly Eric Bana and Geoffrey Rush, but what makes Munich special amongst Spielberg films is just how coldly it deals with the subject matter. The ending must be the coldest, most unsentimental ending in all of his films. It's a great, sad, alienating film. I wasn't a fan of Munich, and I have to say I haven't gone back and seen it since I first kind of dismissed it rather out of hand. For me, it's one of those ones where the problem with it is it's almost too balanced for its own good, but, you know, well done for sticking up for it. Finally, this from TJ Petty. A number of people said this. The Terminal and Catch Me If You Can are two way overlooked Spielberg films. Both are engaging, tell great stories. Plus, the whole airport in The Terminal is a giant set, I know, which when you look at it really has to be admired. And what's even more amazing is that these are movies that Spielberg makes in his spare time between blockbusters. When Spielberg and Tom Hanks come together, it's a beautiful thing. I love Catch Me If You Can. I think The Terminal is fine, but flawed. But moving on to Bond. I've said time and time again that Sam Mendes should have been Oscar nominated for directing Skyfall. I mean, I know all this stuff about Ben Affleck's been overlooked. Yeah, he has. But Sam Mendes is the great overlooked director in the Oscars roll call. Don't worry, Kermode Awards coming up this week. I asked you who you would like to see directing a Bond movie. And a lot of you said, well, why not Mendes again? That's fine. I'm not saying for 1 minute Mendes shouldn't do it again. But just if you could have anyone, who would you have? Loads of replies. This from Gorty Sanchez. Surely it has to be Paul Greengrass. That was kind of top of the pile, I think. All post-Bourne Bonds, and I mean the films with Matt Damon in, not the poor reboot, have attempted to capture some of Bourne's energy. So why not get the Bourne director to show how a Bond film should be made? Very much doubt that Mr. Greengrass would be interested, though. Of course, there's been a lot of discussion about Paul Greengrass and Bond, and pretty much everyone said, as a result of the Bourne movies, the Bond movies had to up their game. This from Dame Hedwig. Sam Mendes has effectively resurrected his career, so he can now move along and make way for Duncan Jones. Moon shows he can handle the acty bits, and Source Code the tense, actiony bits. And he's British. Plus, he can strong-arm his dad into doing the song. For something a little more left field, how about this? Jim Jarmusch. Instead of car chases, we get Bond walking around. Sits in a coffee bar. Listens to Tom Waits. Famous musician comes in. Tilda Swinton plays the villain. They chat. The end. Or this from Aman Samal. I'd like to see a Bond film set in the 50s, directed by Anton Corbijn, starring Michael Fassbender, with Jessica Chastain as M, Jennifer Lawrence as the Bond girl, and Michael Shannon as the villain. Yeah, I'd like to see that too, but it's not going to happen. Finally, this from Sparks Meridian. Quite a long reply, this. Nicholas Winding Refn is an excellent choice. I think David Slade would be good too. Barring that, a return to Martin Campbell is in order. Nolan and Tarantino, terrible choices. One would be boring and totally devoid of any emotion. I don't think that's true of Christopher Nolan, but hey, your opinions. The other would have the chattiest, brattiest bond ever. Before I kill you, Blofeld, I require a tasty refreshment. Barkeep, a martini, shaken not stirred. And you, Blofeld, may I interest you, the condemned man, in a tasty beverage of your choosing? Something non-alcoholic, perhaps. By the way, did you know that alcohol was discovered by a Persian alchemist by the name of Muhammad ibn Zakaria Razi? He also discovered sulfuric acid. And that's neither here nor there for the sake of our discussion. Oh, but how rude of me. I've been doing all the talking. Say, Blofeld, do you know who invented talking? All of which leads us on very nicely to my question about top screen drunks. This is a result of Flight, in which Denzel Washington plays a man wrestling with an alcoholism problem. I asked you for your suggestions for top screen drunks. Loads of suggestions. Here are just a few. This from Not Stirred. Lee Marvin in Cat Ballou. You can smell his breath through the screen and only wonder at what caused his long johns to turn that colour. This from Joe. How about Dennis Hopper in Rumblefish? You can smell the sweat and whiskey dripping off him. Lots of smelling in this category. Nobody played drunk quite like Dennis Hopper. And then two answers which tie rather nicely together. This from Humac. Easy for me. The character that came instantly to mind is Peter Mullen's Joe in My Name is Joe. Utterly compelling and convincing. And from Gojira, Peter Mullen in Tyrannosaur, a beautiful but brutal performance in a film which shows the destructive influence alcohol can hold over an individual, whilst at the same time acting as the triple distilled glue holding the local community together, as shown in the wake scene. These are just a fragment of your responses. Thanks so much. Keep them up, and I will endeavour to be a little bit more on the ball about getting back to you.